Hi, I'm Bronwyn Beatta, and today I am talking about Shad Bala, Discover Your Inner Power Through the Six Strengths. This is my final video for the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship program, and this video is really intended for those of you who are in your more intermediate understandings of Vedic astrology. So whether you're learning it for yourself or for others, I think that this video will help you understand the true power of Shad Bala in your life. Before I get started, I would love to thank Ryan Kurzak for creating and teaching the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship program, and also a big thank you to Fiona Marks for her mentorship, her guidance, her wisdom, and kindness as she supervised my work through the last 3.5 years plus from start to finish. And also, I just want to express great gratitude for my loving partner who has supported me 100% through this entire experience. Here's what you're going to learn in this video. We're going to talk about what Shad Bala is and what it isn't. We'll look at the context of Shad Bala within Vedic astrology. And then we'll discuss the components and indications of each Bala. And then there's going to be a section where we're going to look at free will and how you can play with Shad Bala in your own life, or if you're helping out a client with their own Shad Bala, we'll talk about how you can, use your free will to explore these different strengths within you in order to redirect either your own karmic path or help someone with theirs. We've also got some case studies. You can see their faces on the right-hand side there. We'll look at these so that you have a sense of how to view each of the individual balas within Shad Bala. What I won't be discussing in this presentation are the planetary archetypes in depth or the mathematics, all of the calculations that go into Shad Bala. It can be a huge topic in that regard, and both of these things, the archetypes and the math, can take hours to explain, and I don't really have hours in this short presentation, so we're going to skip that part. However, I will talk about a few examples of the archetypes that I've handpicked for my examples, and I'll also touch briefly on the minimum score required for each planet for the sake of knowledge. However, the purpose of this presentation isn't to go into all of the details of those numbers. If you want to find out more about how each Shad Bala strength is calculated, then absolutely please sign up for the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship program. Why discuss Shad Bala? I thought it would be interesting to touch on the powerfulness of Shad Bala. And instead of just simply viewing it as a mathematical addition to reading someone's chart, that it might actually be of interest to go through the components of Shad Bala and then really explore how you can apply them to your own life. Shad Bala is only one part of embodying Vedic astrology, and yet I feel as though it's a crucial part that could help you consciously find more harmony and peace however you decide to apply it. So let's take a look and see what Shad Bala is. Shad Bala translates to 6 strengths. Shad means 6, Bala means strength. It's a technique found in the text of Brihat Parashara Horashastra. Shad Bala shows the capacity of each of the 7 planets' tendencies in your birth chart for how you show up with a planetary quality, and also how you naturally function or react to certain situations with that planet. As mentioned, Shad Bala is calculated with a lot of different mathematical measurements. This creates a numerical score for each strength. Each planet has a certain minimum number of points it has to reach to be considered strong. Now let's go over what the 6 strengths are. So there's Sthana Bala, Digbala, Kala Bala, Ayana Bala, Chesta Bala, and Drik Bala. Sthana is your beingness. It's your energetic posture. It represents how you hold yourself in the world. Dig Bala represents how you direct a planetary energy, how you take action with that planet. Kala Bala. Kala means time. So this is the force of time or impact that a planet has on your psyche. Ayana Bala represents how you deal with conflict. Shasta Bala is how confident you feel in your life, and maybe where you don't feel so confident if it's weak. In Drik Bala, this represents how receptive you are. This can be receptive to the supportive things in your life and having things flow with grace, or how receptive you might be to distractions and having obstacles. Now that you're aware of the 6 balas, let's take a look at the planetary groups and their minimum required scores. In each of the 6 balas, planets get grouped together depending on their qualities. Sun, Mercury, and Jupiter form a group because they indicate knowledge and the capacity to achieve our ambitions. Moon and Venus form a group because they indicate comfort, intuition, and higher fulfillment. Mars and Saturn form a group because they indicate survival and how we deal with problems. Each of these groups has a minimum score required for each planet and each bala. The groupings are important because if one of the planets in a group is low in, say, Dig Bala, and the other planet in the group is meeting sufficient strength, the stronger planet can lift up the weaker one, and that helps support that particular bala within you. The raw numbers shown here are the minimum required score to show sufficient strength for each planet, and there's a lot of math with how these numbers come about that, like I said, I'm not going to get into. So when we're looking at these raw numbers, let's say, for example, Sthana Bala, and we look at the Sun, and if the Sun has 165 points, its minimum, then it's at 100% strength in that particular bala. So this is how we start to see the percentages come about with Shad Bala. A score that's just below 100% still has some strength. If your percentage for the Sun is at 97% in Sthana Bala, then 97% of the time, you'll be able to tap into the favorable qualities of standing in your solar enthusiasm and consistent commitment to your goals. This slide is the most that I'll get into the math of Shad Bala, so feel free to pause this video and check out these numbers in more depth if you'd like. And also, I just want to point out the fact that no one person has a perfect score for every planet, meaning they're meeting the minimum requirements. And just because you're born with lower scores, it doesn't mean you can't work on them. You absolutely can. I have examples later on in this presentation to show you where this has been done and is very possible. There are 2 other balas that are not really considered a part of the 6, and this is Naisargika Bala and Yuddha Bala. So in Naisargika, this is a natural strength, and every single person all over the entire globe has the exact same number for this strength. And then we look at Yuddha Bala, and this can be translated as planetary war. So this is when 2 planets are in some kind of alignment in the sky and they're too close, right? So one planet is going to win over the other. So that means that a certain number of points, depending on all the math involved, will go from one planet, it'll get taken from that one planet and given to the other. So even a really strong planet in Shad Bala can really get knocked down when it's in this planetary war by the stronger planet, or by the planet that wins the planetary war, and that other planet becomes stronger and kind of takes over the qualities of the planet that lost. And this can really show up in someone's life in the houses, the areas of life that the losing planet, those areas of life might actually succumb to the winner's areas of life. and there's a bit of an imbalance there. So even if a planet has overall really strong Shad Bala, if it's in significant planetary war, then it can really knock it down and pull that strength out. I don't see a lot of Yuddha Bala in most charts that I look at, but if it's in yours or if it's in a client of yours, definitely take note of that it may be occurring. The other thing to talk about with Yuddha Bala is that it is a part of the calculations of prosperity and annihilation of a house. So it has that integration into that part of the chart. Now let's talk about where Shad Bala fits in the bigger scheme of Vedic astrology. So there are two things going on with a planet. There's the quality of a planet, meaning its predisposition, and then there's the agenda of the planet, what the planet does, the karmas that it represents. And so when we look at the quality of a planet, we're looking at things like its position in the chart, its dignity, and Shad Bala fits under that role of the quality. And then this quality then goes into the agenda of a planet, what it does. So like the Bhava Yogas or Lajjitaadi Avashtas. Shad Bala contributes to the quality of a planetary archetype within you. It also shows how much power is behind the agenda of a planet. I've created a visual here to help potentially explain a little bit more of what I was trying to say in the previous slide when it comes to planetary qualities and planetary agendas. So this visual is very oversimplified, it's very linear, and it's not exhaustive, but I think it will give you an idea of how the nature of a planetary archetype within you determines how it expresses its karmic agendas in your life. So on the left side of the planet, you see planetary qualities. This is like the microcosm of a planet. This is what's inside of the archetype that the planet represents within you. All of the smaller components to the very left are made up of many, many mathematical equations. Even other qualities like Ishta and Kashta have mathematics embedded in them. The math of these different parts of the balas are all based on the very moment you were born and the place on the planet where you were born. And of course, even though I've made this visual in a very linear fashion, Vedic astrology is not linear. For example, Sthana Bala includes planetary dignity, Chesta Bala includes Ishta and Kashta calculations, and so forth. But what I want to show you here is that the qualities are inside the planet. The planetary agendas on the right-hand side are more the outer expressions of the planet. That's like the macrocosm, the things that are more obvious. And while Lajjitaadi Avashtas are incredibly psychological and can seem inward, typically a lot of those psychoses love to shine on the outside and really do inform our actions through the yogas we're experiencing. Also, this visual shows that Shad Bala isn't the end-all, be-all of a planet's qualities. There are so many nuances that can come into play based on the planet's positions when you were born. Shad Bala is very important regarding how you show up with a planetary quality, your natural functioning with that planet, and how you react to different situations in life. Now let's take a moment and talk about what Shad Bala isn't. So, first of all, Shad Bala is not a karaka. So, for example, if your moon has high Shad Bala, it doesn't necessarily mean that your mom plays a huge role in your life. If your mom does play a big role, then there are other factors at play, and that's not related to Shad Bala. The second thing is that Shad Bala isn't the only way to measure planetary strength. Please do check out Vimshopak. It's awesome. Okay, so next we'll go through the 6 individual strengths with some fun examples so that you can start to understand what these individual strengths can look like, and hopefully with these examples that I'm going to share, some of what these strengths mean will stick in your mind a little bit better, and then we'll go from there. Sthana Bala is your beingness, and it's comprised of 5 different balas. There's Ocha Bala, Saptavarga Bala, Ojayugma Bala, Kendrati Bala, and Drekana Bala. These 5 balas within Sthana Bala tell us where a planet is by sign, Varga, and its relationship to Earth at the time you were born. These things show how you'll behave with that planet. This is your posture, or how you stand, not necessarily physically, but vibrationally. It's how you non-verbally communicate by the way you hold yourself out in the world. Whichever planet is the highest in raw points in Sthana Bala is the energetic posture or signature that others will notice about you beyond just your physical appearance. In our first example, we have Joe Rogan. We'll be examining his Mars. If you look at his Sthana Bala row at the top, highlighted there in yellow, Mars is the 3rd planet from the left, and you can see that his raw score for Mars is 255 points, and his percentage, right under that raw score, is 265%. His Mars well outshines the other planets in Sthana Bala, meaning that his energetic signature that he stands in and that others can feel from him is very Mars. Karmically, according to his birth chart, he's been a commentator for the Ultimate Fighting Championship, a blunt and loud comedian, and I think a courageous podcaster given the types of controversial guests and topics that he's had on his show. When he first went into entertainment, in his first television acting gigs, he played bit parts like a baseball player, which is very Mars, and in another show he played an electrician and a handyman, both also being very Martian as well. So remember that Shad Bala isn't a physical indicator. Physical things are what's in the Rashi chart. But Shad Bala shows how strong a planet can perform in someone's life. So even though Joe Rogan is ruled by Venus as a Taurus ascendant, he naturally stands or has the posture of Mars. Mars is the energetic signature that people notice from him before he even opens his mouth. Dig Bala. This is directional strength. And so we look at each cardinal direction when we think about where each planet might get strength. And we look to the cusps, the bhava cusps for this. It's very easy to think about the directions as the houses. And sometimes the cusps line up with the houses in someone's chart, but sometimes they won't. And so it's really important to look at the cusp location within someone's chart to see if a planet is going to receive Dig Bala. So both Mercury and Jupiter, the closer they are to the first cusp, the more strength they're going to have in Dig Bala. With Saturn, it's the 7th cusp. The closer it is there, the stronger its Dig Bala will be. And then Moon and Venus, we like to get them really close to the 4th cusp for them to have any kind of strength. And then the 10th cusp, that's where the Sun and Mars really get Dig Bala. So while Sthana Bala is how you vibrate in the world, Dig Bala shows how effectively you put your vibration into the world. It's the effectiveness of the action of that planet's energy. The higher a planet's points in Dig Bala, the better you can aim with that planetary energy. Another way to state it is that you can hear the voice of that planet. If it's too weak in Dig Bala, you may not be able to hear the innate nature of that planetary archetype. In this example, we have Dr. Maya Angelou. She was an American poet, screenwriter, memoirist, and civil rights activist who was a collaborator and friends with people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. Her impact redefined how people thought about race and culture. So here we're looking at Maya Angelou's sun's Dig Bala. She's a Leo ascendant ruled by the sun. For Dig Bala, we want to see the sun get as close to the 10th cusp as possible. Even though her exalted sun isn't in the same house as her 10th cusp, it's getting close enough. So how do we see this? If you would look at the bottom right-hand corner, you can see the Bhava Chalita cusps table that I opened up. I'm using the Campanus house system. The degree of her 10th cusp in Taurus is sitting at 17 degrees 39 minutes, and her sun is in Aries at 14 degrees and 48 minutes, as you can see in her birth chart. Now look up into the upper right-hand corner of her Shad Bala, to the column with her sun and the row for Dig Bala. The sun needs 35 points to meet sufficiency in Dig Bala. And if we were to have gone through all the math of how to calculate Dig Bala for the sun, we'd see that she has 48 points. So this takes her sun's Dig Bala well beyond the required minimum into a percentage of 137%. So according to her Rashi chart, she had leadership karma to play out. That's the agenda of the planet. And with her sun showing up at 137% Dig Bala, she could absolutely hear her sun's agendas and direct her life path with a lot of strength. Kala Bala. This is force of time. It's the strength you acquire due to the time of your birth. It's comprised of 7 different balas. There's Nanonarta Bala, and I just wrote midnight and noon, but what it's really about is that certain planets are more powerful at midnight and certain ones have more power during the noontime. Then there's Paksha Bala, Tribhag Bala, Varsha Bala, Masa Bala, Dina Bala, and Hora Bala. Kala Bala shows how strongly an event will show up in your consciousness based on each planet, what kind of imprints are made. Planets highest in Kala Bala will deeply define your character. They're like grooves in your psyche. Consider which house in your birth chart a planet with high Kala Bala is placed. This will give you more information on the concentrated force from that planet. Not only does Kala Bala tell how deeply you're affected by a planet, but also with what kind of force you use that planet. And by force, I mean power. How forcefully do you use Mars to make instinctual decisions? How much power do you use with your inspiration when utilizing your sun? What is the force of your ability to hear your inner emotional state with the moon or Venus? Consider dashas with Kala Bala. If you're in a dasha of a planet that's strong in Kala Bala, meaning it has over 100%, the activities during that cycle will be more impactful to you in the big scheme of your life. There's a tendency to define yourself by the activities of that planet's dasha. If a planet's Kala Bala is low, even if a really big event occurred in your life, you won't look back on that planet's dasha and feel like that time frame necessarily defined who you are. So here we have Marie Curie as our example for examining Kala Bala. She was a Polish physicist and chemist who lived in France at the turn of the 20th century. She was a pioneer in research on radioactivity, a term which she coined. She discovered the chemical elements of polonium and radium. Curie was the first woman to ever win a Nobel Prize, and the first person and only woman to win a Nobel Prize twice. She is also the only person to win a Nobel Prize in 2 scientific fields. So incredibly accomplished. Kala Bala is really interesting to me because it's about the strength of a planet's psychological impact. Kala has to do with time, and so a great way to apply Kala Bala is when a planetary dasha is running. the stronger the percentage of a planet in one's Kala Bala, the more the events of a dasha will impact the person's psyche. For Marie Curie, instead of focusing on which planet is strongest in her Kala Bala, I'd actually like to look at one that's under 100%. Mercury is at 90% for her. In her birth chart, Mercury is on her ascendant as her angular 7th and 10th lord, and therefore a really impactful planet as far as her outward karmas go. It was during her Mercury Mahadasha that she made her scientific discoveries. So even though she made the most important discoveries of her life and received her first Nobel Prize in her Mercury Mahadasha, receiving these awards may not have had a deep impact on her psyche. When Mercury has a stronger Kala Bala, one might define themselves by what they have. Mercury manages the concrete plane, and so it's about having those material things. Marie Curie didn't seem to define herself by what she possessed, including the physical Nobel medal. Instead, we can see her Jupiter as dominating Kala Bala. Her beliefs and philosophies defined her happiness. Her sun was also incredibly high, as she was driven to be number 1 in her field. When Mercury Dasha ended, she didn't dwell on the great achievements of that time and stop there. She carried on to receive her second Nobel Prize and evolved further with her research and the applicability of radioactivity in World War I. The impacts to her psyche had more to do with her Jupiterian purpose rather than the mercurial management of material things. Ayana Bala deals with conflict resolution. What makes up Ayana Bala are calculations regarding the northern and southern declinations from the equator. The northern hemisphere runs from Aries to Libra, and the southern hemisphere runs from Libra to Aries. Sun, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter gain power in the north. The Moon and Saturn gain strength in the south, and Mercury has strength in both hemispheres. The northern hemisphere is said to be the realm of the devas, or of higher ideals, and that's how conflict is solved. The southern hemisphere is said to be the realm of the asuras, or of conflict itself and hard work. Having two hemispheres means that there are naturally polarities, and therefore potential for conflict. Planets strong in the north deal with conflicts in a Devic manner, in an idealistic way, in a righteous way, or a way that might be considered good, noble, and true. Planets strong in the south deal with conflicts in an Asuric manner, in a coarser way, to do whatever it takes to get through the ordeal. We as human beings need both hemispheres operating within us because we're made of both hemispheres and all the planets and all of the signs. When I thought about conflict resolution, my mind immediately went to the warrior of peace, Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi was a lawyer, but mostly known for his political activism through nonviolent protests in the first half of the 1900s, first in South Africa and then in his home country of India. He was a key figure in India's independence from Great Britain in the middle of the century. While he has a few planets strong in Ayana Bala, I'd like to focus on Saturn's strength at 288%. Saturn is in the southern part of the zodiac in his birth chart, where it likes it. Saturn is a Shudra planet, meaning servant, and this planetary energy is incredibly serving when it comes to the conflicts of the southern realm. A strong, healthy Saturn energy helped Gandhi deal with losses and conflicts. He didn't win every situation he came upon. He spent decades working hard for greatness in the form of a servant. He wore peasant clothing, for example. He also fasted often, not just for his own spiritual gain, but also as a form of protest. He, and those inspired to follow him, bore violence from others without fighting back to make very strong points with nonviolence. He suffered through conflicts without trying to avoid them. Saturn too far in the north will have too much idealism, and a person may feel like things shouldn't be happening. It just makes the suffering worse. Gandhi, with Saturn's realism, didn't complain, but engaged in hardships head-on in order to create more social, political, and religious inclusiveness throughout India, and eventually to liberate his country from Britain's unjust colonialism. Shad Bala is the strength of confidence in your life. What makes it up is that it's an aspect of Ishta and Kashta. Shad Bala lets you see how well a planet will benefit itself or the other planets that it may be aspecting. There's planetary strength due to the planet's motion. The slower a planet is in your chart, the stronger its quality. And this is when we start bringing in retrograde, because the planet is slowing way down to the point that it looks like it's stopping or going backwards. And that also creates brightness in the sky. So it's the brightness of a planet in your life. Shad Bala shows how you move through the world with a particular planet. Sun's Shad Bala is related to its Ayana Bala, meaning the farther north it is, the higher its Shad Bala score. The moon's Shad Bala is related to its Paksha Bala, or the brighter and fuller it is, the stronger it is in Shad Bala. The other planets' scores are based on their retrograde motion. The higher the Shad Bala, the brighter the planet appears in the sky. In this way, it's more brilliant in your life. There's confidence with what that planet indicates in your experience. Higher Shad Bala means that you won't shy away from the things you need to learn or the failures you might incur with that planet. Lower Shad Bala means that you may not consciously use that planet because you may already feel like you've failed with that planetary energy. Ringo Starr, best known as the drummer of the Beatles rock band in the 1960s. I'm examining his Shad Bala and mainly focusing on his Venus, because while Ringo had talent as a drummer, he was kind of goofy looking and perhaps not exactly what someone would call heartthrob rock star material like the other Beatles. When looking at his Shad Bala scores, Venus is by far his strongest, with 183% strength. You can see that it's the one planet in his chart that's in retrograde motion. Venus, on the outside, can deal with beauty. Shad Bala speaks more to what's on the inside of a person. When Venus has sufficient Shad Bala, or confidence, the person has high self-worth. Ringo may not have been as attractive as the other Beatles, but he still felt worthy to be in the band. Venus weighs the value of things, including the value of oneself, one's time, and one's energy. Venus also informs someone on how to be diplomatic and fair, and find compromise. During the later years of the Beatles, when a lot of disagreements and strong tensions were mounting between the other three members, Ringo was considered the peacemaker in the band. His own self-worth and diplomacy shined through with this aspect of his Shad Bala. Drik Bala is the strength of receptivity. It's about the aspectual strength from graha aspects towards a planet. So it's the general energy going towards a planet. There's a positive and a negative score. There's no minimum, so that means there's no percentile. Benefics aspecting a planet give more points, and malefics take those points away. Full and partial aspects are counted. So this is about how well things are working out with a planet's energy in your life. Is there support and flow, or adversity and obstacles? A positive number for a planet shows how receptive you are to support with that planet. A negative number shows how receptive you are to getting distracted or blocked with a certain planet. If you're in a planetary dasha of a planet with positive Drik Bala, during that time you may feel like things tend to go your way. You may also tend to like the things related to that planet in general because it's more natural and less stressful. The planet with the highest Shad Bala score will be the planetary energy that you feel most comfortable in. My example for Shad Bala is Frida Kahlo. I picked Frida because she led a life of extremes. On one hand, her karmic momentum, as shown in her birth chart, allowed her to become a famous painter in Mexico when women weren't exactly celebrated or honored for their skills like they are now. She was really extraordinary on this point. On the other hand, she had a lot of physical difficulties, chronic pain, medical problems, marital problems, addictions. I mean, it was crazy, right? So, Shad Bala is about adversity or support. So planets receiving benefic graha aspects, like her Saturn and Mars, are getting a lot of support. And her karmic experience in her lifetime needed that support. Her other planets are receiving a lot of malefic graha aspects. And so she felt less supported with the karmas of those planets. So let's look at her Shad Bala highlighted in yellow. Mars has positive 41 points, and Saturn has positive 72 points. These are both really high Shad Bala scores. These numbers show that while she was trying to focus on her inspirations, Mars and Saturn energies generally worked out well for her. And it's a good thing too, because based on her karmas, she needed these planets of survival. Mars being more of an instinctual surviving planet, and Saturn being the one who bears the burdens of life, of all the things that we can't change. With Mars, she had the capacity to deal with challenges, especially endless physical ones or mental emotional ones, and she took the initiative to continue her work and paint about how much pain she suffered. Saturn, being high in Shad Bala, allowed her to weather through hardships and surrender into her suffering. Everything else in her Shad Bala is in the negatives. They're not even neutral at 0. So, for example, let's just take a look at her moon. The moon is supposed to be giving that sense of being nurtured and feeling satisfied, and it was in the negatives. So this means that even when she had outward successes, she generally didn't feel emotionally supported throughout her life. In fact, whenever she pursued her emotional well-being, malefics graha aspected so substantially on her moon that it meant that within herself, she was actively being prevented from enjoying her successes emotionally. The planets are active karmas, and so Shad Bala gives us an insight into how actively someone can receive the good things, or instead, how they receive obstacles brought before them regarding a planet, whatever that planet represents in life. So we can see with Frida that even though she tried really hard to receive grace regarding a lot of her planetary karmas, she was usually deterred from that grace given how many planets are in negative Shad Bala. And what I'd love to bring to you as the listener is how to recognize negative Shad Bala scores and understand them for what they are, and then see how you can navigate your own life or support your client in ways that create less victimization. When Shad Bala scores are negative, it can feel like no matter how hard you try, something always comes up. I've heard people say again and again, it's always something, as if something were happening to them. I encourage you to contemplate, with loving patience and presence, how you or your client can start releasing the impediments that present themselves so that you can find receptivity to more grace. When all 6 balas get added up and divided in the end, you get a final Shad Bala score for each planet. This score then gets applied to each planet's agendas, such as the Bhava Yogas and Lajjitaadi Avashtas. I'm going to share a quote with you from the book The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 2. It goes, "The total Shad Bala values indicate the ability of a planet to influence the chart according to its essential nature. This may be for good or ill, as both the positive and negative features of a planet are strengthened if it has a high value." In the next couple of slides, I'm going to share an example with you of someone's Shad Bala scoring where one planet is exceptionally high, and you'll get to see how that impacts their Lajjitaadi Avashtas. Here's an example of a Shad Bala graph showing the totality of planetary strengths next to each other. The numbers below are the percentages. 1.0 would equal 100%. So, for example, in this lineup, the total for Jupiter is 102% because it's showing 1.02. It's quite sufficient in its overall strength for this person. If you look over to the left and we see the Sun, it's weaker overall with 88%. Perhaps this person is fine with this amount of strength. It all depends on the bigger picture of the chart and how this person has made conscious choices throughout their life when working with these planetary archetypes. But what I really want to focus on is the total for Mars in this person's chart. It's at 203% of its required strength. It's very strong in how it plays into this person's yogas and avashtas, for good and for ill. Let's take a deeper look into this person's experience, this person who has a really strong Mars, and we'll dive into what their experience has actually been. So on the right, we're seeing their raw Shad Bala scores, and on the left, we're seeing a table of how each planet is impacting each other in Lajjitaadi Avashtas. In this left-hand table, the solid bold scores for each planet are their raw Shad Bala scores, taken from the right-hand graph. So for instance, Saturn's bold number, there in the bottom portion of this left-hand table, it's 392.0. And you can see 392 on top of the highlighted bar graph on the right. So this information is incredibly helpful to understand what a person is experiencing based on planetary relationships, meaning whether planets are friendly, neutral, or inimical towards one another. So let's look at the relationship between this person's incredibly strong Mars in Shad Bala and its impact on Saturn. So as you can see on the right, Saturn has ample strength. In its raw Shad Bala score, it functions beautifully by meeting its required minimum scores, and it has a total of 131% strength. This is over and beyond what's needed for it to fulfill its agendas in this person's life. But if you look to the left-hand table with the Lajjitaadi Avashtas, you'll see in that red circle that I drew there, where Mars is putting the totality of its influence onto Saturn, taking Saturn's strength down into the deep negatives at negative 216.8 points. So we're also seeing that Saturn in this chart also isn't getting any help from friendly planets. As you can see, there are no green numbers in Saturn's column indicating any help. So this is where we get to see Shad Bala's impact on the agenda of a planet, and therefore the experience of the person. And just to say it, I'm sure you know this, but Mars is inimical to Saturn. So we're seeing how this enemy, putting all of its weight, being much stronger, is really, really pulling on Saturn's capacity to function in this person's life. So now we're getting to see Shad Bala's impact on the agenda of a planet, and therefore this person's experience. So this particular person is someone who, by their very innate nature, due to Mars's impact on Saturn, feels rushed, like they don't have enough time, they don't have the resources or the money. And I know that many of us can feel this way, But for this particular person, this kind of karmic patterning runs so deep. And for a lot of their life, they thought that this was just the way things are. And it's like it was just written in their subconscious. So this Lajjitaadi Avashta became a huge, huge stressor in their life in general, but then it especially showed up during their Saturn Mahadasha. This person, especially at the start of their Saturn Mahadasha, lost most of their life's savings, and with the little they had left, they decided that they would start a small business venture. As per the nature of Saturn, they worked very hard and without much profit, and their stress levels during this cycle of Saturn were consequently then impacting their mental health and their physical health tremendously. Because of so much hardship, they took great interest in trying to figure out how to moderate this innate default setting of Mars. And through various remedies, such as meditation, wearing gemstones, and changing their psychology through various types of counseling, their dire financial situation actually did ease up. And the lack that was so amplified by such a strong Mars pulling on their Saturn actually calmed down. This person now practices abundance in more ways than just focusing on finances. They see abundance in their health, in their relationships now, and in their own spiritual advancement. So this is an example of how to see Shad Bala impacting someone's life, especially when it comes to the Lajjitaadi Avashtas. Next, I'll take you through a bit of a visual journey so that you can get another perspective on how it might be possible to actually embody Shad Bala in your own life, or how you might share with your clients, whether you're wanting to strengthen a planetary energy or simply moderate a planetary energy within you. We're going to take a look at this simple picture and create an imaginary story for the sake of how we might think about Shad Bala. Let's say that these colors, blue, black, and yellow, each represent a certain planetary karma in someone's life. In this visual example, I'm going to assume some theoretical Lajjitaadi Avashtas and Bhava Yogas just for the sake of explanation. The blue, black, and yellow are the distinct karmas one has within their birth chart. And yet we have free will. This is like having an editor tool at your disposal. Let's say this make-believe person is a meditator and loves yoga. They have outward karmas for that. Perhaps the blue in this visual represents Saturn in their natal makeup. It's pretty strong, and they feel like they've got a good sense of discipline and yogic detachment in their life, but distractions keep getting in the way of their meditation. The yellow can represent this person's inner sun. It's also strong, and they've got goals, but in a way that they feel like they've got to be number one in everything, including meditation. The great thing is that they can lead others in meditation and yoga. The black might be Mars. It's really strong. It's so prominent that this yogi has a lot of shoulds and shouldn'ts around their sadhana. These were their default settings that they were born into, and yet there's a lack of balance and happiness in their life. What can this person do, if anything? They can make some adjustments, like using a color editor tool, by understanding their Shad Bala scores. The colors are still the same colors they used to be, but now with different strengths. We still have blue, yellow, and black, although the black looks gray now. Maybe this person strengthens their Saturnine energetic into a deeper blue by removing the things that they know can distract them from their meditation practice. The yellow of the sun is lightened up here, and in this way, they don't have to be number one or the main leader when it comes to meditation. They just get to do it for themselves, and if others follow their example because they're a natural-born leader, then great. If not, they don't have to overcompensate. The black color representing Mars isn't so black anymore. It's still in the black family, but it's lighter. Perhaps they incorporate a lot more nervous system release techniques and aren't as uptight about all of the shoulds and shouldn'ts around yoga. Then they begin to find when it's appropriate to have high standards and when it's beneficial to simply relax into their practice. So now to compare, on the left you can see the default settings of their planetary strengths that they were born with. On the right-hand side is what their life looks like after making some conscious adjustments in their Shad Bala strengths for greater harmony and peace within their life. Most of these kinds of shifts don't happen instantaneously, but are developed over time. This theoretical person still has the karmic momentum that they were born with, but by learning more about and becoming conscious of their planetary strengths, embodying their free will, and employing some remedies, they get to customize the strengths of the energies within themselves. Shad Bala then isn't just a bunch of abstract math, it's a practice. When I think about my own life and adjusting Shad Bala scores, I ask myself these questions. What creates a win-win situation more and more often with my actions? What feels more harmonious within myself? What's more in alignment with my Dharma and the greater good of all beings? What brings me closer to remembering my oneness with the absolute supremeness of all life more and more often? In the last couple examples, I've talked about Shad Bala's impact using its overall score. But you can choose how you would like to use Shad Bala. You can use it in a broader sense, using the total Shad Bala score, or in a finer sense, by picking one aspect of Shad Bala that feels like a weak link, and then you can boost it. Within our coursework on Shad Bala in the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship program, Ryan would remind us that karmas don't have to be set in stone. This is information that we've received from various teachers throughout time. And by we, I mean all of us, not just us apprentices, but all of us have gained this information from teachers in the yogic tradition, and it's also in sacred texts like Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So if, for example, a planet is weak in one of the 6 balas, it can be strengthened, especially if it has positive implications for your life. I'll give you an example in the next slide on what it means to strengthen the quality of a planet within a specific bala from my own experience. Okay, so here's my own Shad Bala scoring, and we're going to look at Venus through the balas. Without showing you my birth chart, the placement and dignity of Venus in my chart are good. There are some harder Lajjitaadi Avashtas against it, though. When I look into the individual balas of Venus, I see that by birth, I can easily stand in the energetic posture of Venus with Sthana Bala. I know how to direct my Venusian energy well with Dig Bala. Kala isn't very high, and neither is Ayana. But at the bottom there, you can see that in Drik Bala, Venus energy and the things Venus represents in my chart do flow easily, and I can be receptive to them because I have a positive number there, and that has felt very true in my life. But Chesta Bala is the one that's really low. There are only 4 raw points, giving it only 13%. And even though I've blacked it out so you can't see it, when considering planetary groupings and getting help, my moon is also low in Chesta Bala, just so you know. So there wasn't any help coming from the other planet that Venus is supposed to be on the same team with. So this was the default setting that I was born into at birth, which means that despite all of the wonderful Venus archetypal energy I did have, I innately lacked self-worth. I mistakenly equated self-love with selfishness. So for most of my life, I didn't value myself. I didn't value my time, my energy, or even my own opinions. I didn't understand the wholeness of life and my connection to everyone and everything at that time. I was completely under the impression that I was separate and my lack of self-worth only affected me. A few years ago, I had so little self-worth that I wasn't sure what my life was about anymore. I wasn't suicidal necessarily, but I really felt that I had nothing to contribute to the world. Absolutely no value. Then one day, when my partner had had enough of my self-loathing and couldn't keep on being in relationship with someone who didn't value herself, I somewhat dramatically sunk to the ground in tears, all wrapped up in my ego and self-centeredness and despair. And in that moment, fortunately, the idea of just love yourself came into my awareness. This is the power of having higher Dig Bala in Venus, so I could hear the voice of Venus. Because I didn't want my love to exit my life, I actually listened to this idea. Even though it felt like I would be faking it, in that moment of realizing I was going to lose the most important person in my life, who actually saw through all of my mistaken identities and ego layers and all of the static I had in my mind, I chose to love myself unconditionally. I really had no other choice if I wanted to end the ongoing misery I had been creating for myself my entire life. So I got up from the ground, wiped away my tears, and silently made a commitment to love myself, to value myself, and truly believe that even by just breathing, I was worthy. Since that day, I haven't looked back. It was a subtle, very quiet, unannounced change that I made within my Shad Bala strength. Now, every single minute of every day, even when I'm low-resourced and crashing, I witness myself with love. And then I say, because of how much I love myself, I'm going to make a better decision right now to nurture myself and get out of my crabby state. The more I love and value myself and intentionally raise my inner Shad Bala score for Venus, the happier I am, and the more I can contribute to raising the frequency of everyone who I come in contact with. And now I'm also an equal in my relationship. My partnership with my love is actually the best it's ever been. And this all came about from fine-tuning a microsection within Shad Bala. Shad Bala seems so small and quick to overlook, and yet with devoted practice and patience over time, the effects of making one subtle change within the quality of my inner Venus has rippled into massive tidal waves of ease, grace, and lightness in my being, and to those who I engage with. So now that you know about the individual Shad Balas and the potency they can have collectively, how will you empower yourself with your 6 strengths? What parts within you feel like they're no longer serving you, your purpose, your goals, or your relationships? And what parts of you do you want to celebrate? What's been natural and good? What was really difficult, and now you've totally upgraded your body, mind, and soul? Not just for yourself, but for the well-being of others too. And that's it. So, to review, we defined Shad Bala by what it is, and then mentioned what it isn't. We looked at the context of Shad Bala within Vedic astrology. We talked a little bit about planetary groups and minimum required scores. And then we discussed the nature of each of the 6 strengths along with case study examples. Then we saw how to apply the total Shad Bala score to your experience, and then what it can look like when you go into the finer aspects of Shad Bala in order to empower yourself. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Bronwyn Beatta. You can find out more about my work or schedule a Vedic astrology reading with me at sunmoonveda.com. For more information on Asheville Vedic Astrology, please visit ashevillevedicastrology.wordpress.com. And if you're feeling inspired and ready to upgrade your astrological knowledge, and even more importantly, the quality of your life, I highly recommend becoming an Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprentice. To do that and learn as I have learned, please visit vedic-astrology.teachable.com. Thank you again for watching. May you be well.